What is happening between Washington and Ottawa right now doesn't look like an alliance. It doesn't even look like a disagreement between friends. It looks like a divorce. For 70 years, the United States and Canada stood shoulder to shoulder on every major conflict. Korea, the Cold War, Afghanistan, NATO, they bled together, they built together, they trusted each other with the most sensitive intelligence on earth. But as of this morning, that trust is shattered. Donald Trump tried to drag Canada into a war. He thought he was dealing with the old Canada, the loyal ally that always shows up, the partner that never questions the mission, the neighbor that salutes when the Pentagon says go. He was wrong. Mark Carney didn't salute. He didn't hedge. He didn't send a vague diplomatic statement expressing concern while quietly deploying troops behind the scenes. Instead, he did something that no Canadian prime minister has done in modern memory. He told the president of the United States that Canada will not fight his war, and the consequences of that one decision are already rippling through NATO headquarters, through the Pentagon, and probably right into the future of the Western alliance itself. Trump is livid. The hawks in Washington are foaming, and the media is completely missing the real story. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what happened, who flinched first, and why the military partnership you grew up trusting is officially broken. So let's cut through the noise. Here is exactly what went down in the last 72 hours. It started, as it always does, with an escalation. President Trump, furious over Iran's latest nuclear enrichment breach and the collapse of back-channel negotiations in Oman, decided he was done with diplomacy. He went on Truth Social at 5 a.m. and issued a declaration. He announced that the United States was assembling a coalition of the willing for immediate military operations against Iranian nuclear facilities. He named Canada specifically as a key partner and stated he expected Canadian naval and air assets deployed to the Persian Gulf within 14 days. He didn't ask, he announced. He treated Canadian sovereignty like a line item in a Pentagon budget. Now, usually this is the part where Canadian officials quietly comply. They send a liaison team. They issue a careful statement about standing with allies. They figure out how to participate without making it a headline. That didn't happen. Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney convened an emergency session of the Canadian. He walked to the press gallery in Ottawa 3 hours later. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look conflicted. He looked like a man who had war-gamed this exact scenario 100 times. He looked into the camera and said simply, "Canada will not participate in an illegal war of aggression." He didn't soften it. He didn't leave the door open. He rejected the deployment outright. And then he went a step further. He announced that Canada would invoke its sovereign right under NATO Article 11 to refuse participation in any military action not sanctioned by the UN Security Council or directly tied to collective self-defense. He called on all NATO allies to demand a diplomatic resolution. The internet detonated. Trump fired back with a barrage of posts calling Carney a coward, a puppet of the mullahs, and a traitor to Western civilization. But while Trump was typing, something extraordinary happened on the world stage. France issued a statement supporting Canada's position. Germany followed within the hour. Japan called for restraint for the first time in modern history. A U.S. president announced a military coalition, and the coalition said no. They didn't just refuse, they rallied around the country that refused first. You need to understand how seismic this is. This isn't just a policy disagreement. This is a total collapse of the post-World War II security order. Trump is used to command. He's used to snapping his fingers and watching allies fall in line. But yesterday, he found out that command only works if the people you're commanding still trust your judgment. And Mark Carney, he doesn't trust Trump's judgment. I know that sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like I'm exaggerating. But I want to show you the receipts because when you see the evidence, you realize this isn't theater. It's geopolitics. And the geopolitics are turning against the White House. Let's look at receipt number 1. The NATO fracture. Within 2 hours of Carney's statement, NATO Secretary General held an emergency press briefing. He didn't endorse the U.S. position. Why? Because the alliance doesn't just follow orders from Washington. It operates on consensus. And the consensus inside NATO right now is that Trump's Iran strategy is reckless, unilateral, and potentially catastrophic. Sources inside NATO headquarters in Brussels say that behind closed doors, ambassadors from at least 12 member states expressed serious reservations about the legality and the strategic wisdom of strikes on Iran. Canada didn't just say no. Canada said what everyone else was thinking, and now that the door is open, allies are pouring through it. Receipt number 2, the intelligence leverage. This is the one nobody in the American media is discussing. They think Canada is just a junior partner with some peacekeepers. Canada is a core member of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. That means Canada shares signals intelligence, satellite data, and cyber capabilities with the United States at the deepest possible level. It is one of only 4 countries on Earth with that access. When Carney rejected the war, he didn't just pull troops off the table, he implicitly threatened the intelligence relationship. If the U.S. retaliates against Canada politically or economically for this refusal, the entire Five Eyes framework is at risk. No Five Eyes means the U.S. loses critical surveillance coverage in the Arctic, in the North Atlantic, and across cyber domains where Canadian assets are embedded in American operations. Pentagon officials know this. The NSA knows this. Just the possibility of a Five Eyes disruption caused classified briefings to be convened at Langley yesterday afternoon. That is the intelligence community telling you that Carney has leverage Trump cannot afford to test. Receipt number 3, the global realignment. Now, Trump loves to dismiss Carney as a globalist banker playing prime minister. And yes, Carney is a creature of the international system. He ran the Bank of England. He chaired the Financial Stability Board. He knows every central banker and finance minister on the planet by first name. But here is why that matters right now. While Trump was rage posting, sources say Carney was on the phone, not with the Pentagon, but with Paris, with Berlin, with Canberra. He is building a counter coalition. We are seeing reports of a joint communique being drafted between Canada, France, and Germany calling for an emergency UN Security Council session on Iran. Do you see what's happening? Trump is playing battlefield commander, trying to force one ally at a time into his war. Carney is playing grand strategy. He's assembling a global front to isolate the U.S. position diplomatically. He's using his credibility in international institutions to reframe the narrative. Instead of Canada the deserter, it's Canada the peacemaker, and it's working. European defense stocks tumbled yesterday. Oil futures spiked on war fears. But Canadian government bonds actually strengthened. That is the receipt that matters most. The money is betting on Carney's restraint, not Trump's aggression. So why is this happening? Why is the most powerful military on earth struggling to rally a coalition against a country it has sanctioned for 45 years? It's because Trump has burned through his credibility and he's trapped by his own history. We have seen this playbook before. In 2019, he almost struck Iran and pulled back at the last minute. In 2002-04, he promised to end wars, not start them. But now he's pivoting to maximum pressure, and nobody believes he has a plan beyond the first strike. Trump's entire strategy relies on dominance. He hits hard, he demands loyalty, and he expects compliance so he can project strength. He needs a quick coalition to justify the strike. But what happens when the dominance doesn't work? He has no plan B. When Carney said no, he shattered the illusion of a unified Western front. And now Trump is forced to either go it alone or back down. And here is the trap. If he strikes Iran without allies, the United States bears the full cost. No burden sharing, no diplomatic cover, no coalition legitimacy. Iranian retaliation hits American bases, American ships, and American oil infrastructure alone. The very soldiers he promised to protect, the men and women in uniform deployed across the Middle East, are the first ones exposed when there's no allied support on their flanks. He knows this. The Joint Chiefs know this. We are hearing leaks from the Pentagon that military planners are furious at the political team. They are saying you cannot launch a major military operation with no coalition support. You will overextend the force 6 months before the midterms, but Trump can't back down. His ego won't let him. He publicly named Canada as a partner. He announced the coalition before he had one. If he retreats now, he looks weak. He looks like he was humiliated by a country with a smaller military than the Texas National Guard, so he creates more noise. He attacks Carney's patriotism. He threatens to pull U.S. troops from the Arctic. He threatens to revoke Canadian defense contracts. It's noise. It's the sound of a commander-in-chief who issued an order and realized nobody was following it. He is escalating because he doesn't know how to de-escalate. You're watching a man who treats military alliances like loyalty tests. In a business, you can fire someone who disobeys. In a military alliance, you can't fire your neighbor. Canada isn't going anywhere. The shared border isn't going anywhere. NORAD isn't going anywhere. Trump is fighting the architecture of 70 years of collective security. And the harder he fights it, the more isolated America becomes. Look at the response from the Pentagon's retired brass. They didn't rally behind the president. They issued public letters warning about strategic overreach. Look at the response from Republican senators on the Armed Services Committee. They are quiet. They are nervous. They know a unilateral Iran war with no exit strategy is political poison. Trump is alone on this ledge. He walked out there himself, and the wind is picking up. Now, let's talk about Mark Carney, because if you don't follow Canadian politics closely, you might think he's just another technocrat out of his depth on military affairs. You might think he's just another liberal leader afraid of conflict. You would be dead wrong. Mark Carney is not a naive peacenik. He is a strategic thinker. He is a crisis architect. He navigated the Bank of England through the most turbulent period in modern financial history. He stared down Brexit, a sovereign debt crisis, and a pandemic. He knows how to manage chaos. He knows how to sit in a room where every indicator is flashing red and make a decision that holds. When Trump screams, Carney models. Notice his tone in that press conference. He didn't pound the podium. He didn't invoke patriotic slogans. He wore a dark navy suit. He spoke in precise, measured language, and he cited international law. He is positioning himself as the rational voice of the West. And in a world terrified of another Middle Eastern war, that is an extraordinarily powerful position. The world is exhausted by conflict. Europe is drained by Ukraine. Asia is anxious about Taiwan. The global economy is fragile. Everyone is desperate for someone to say stop. Carney is saying stop. He is telling the world Canada stands for the rule of law. We don't start wars without legal authority. We don't follow blindly. We are the conscience of the alliance. By doing this, he transforms Trump's war drive into Canada's moral authority. Every time Trump demands obedience, Carney looks more principled by contrast. Every time Trump threatens an ally for refusing to fight, Carney looks like the defender of sovereignty. This is a strategy of asymmetric resistance. Canada cannot match the U.S. militarily. The U.S. defense budget is 20 times larger. The U.S. has zero. But Carney knows he doesn't need to match firepower. He just has to make the political cost of going alone so devastating that Trump can't sustain it. He is using what strategists call institutional leverage. He isn't challenging U.S. military power. He is challenging U.S. legitimacy. He's targeting the specific diplomatic and legal frameworks that America needs to justify military action. He's not blocking the tanks. He's pulling the legal ground out from under them. And here is the other thing Carney understands: timing. Trump needs this war before political momentum shifts. He has midterms. He has a restless base. He needs a decisive victory now. Carney is playing for delay. He knows that if he holds the line long enough, the diplomatic process at the UN will create space. Allies will peel away further. Domestic opposition in the U.S. will mount until the strike becomes politically impossible. It's a standoff. One leader is pounding the war drums and screaming for action. The other leader has opened every diplomatic channel on earth and is calmly running out the clock. Who do you think blinks first? So why should you care? Maybe you're watching this in Texas or Ohio or California. Maybe you're watching this in Europe or Australia. You might think, this is just foreign policy noise. It doesn't touch my life. You're wrong. This affects everything. The global economy is a web. It was built over decades on the assumption that Western allies act together. That assumption just collapsed. If the U.S. strikes Iran alone, oil prices don't just rise, they explode. If Iran retaliates by closing the Strait of Hormuz, even temporarily, 20% of the world's oil supply vanishes overnight. If you are paying for gas this month, add $2 a gallon by next month. If you are watching your retirement portfolio, prepare for a defense stock spike and an everything else crash. If you are in the military or have family in uniform, this is personal. No coalition means no shared burden. But beyond the economics and the military, there is a deeper fracture here. We are watching the end of the automatic alliance. For decades, when the U.S. said we're going in, the Western world suited up. That era ended yesterday. Canada, the most loyal ally, the quietest partner, the one who followed America into Kandahar and came home with flag-draped coffins, just said no. Not this time. And if Canada can say no, who else starts saying no? Does Australia say no? Does the UK, does France refuse to open airspace? We are watching the fragmentation of the Western military order in real time. And it's not because of Putin. It's not because of Xi Jinping. It's because Washington decided to treat a war of choice as a test of loyalty. This signals a world where America fights alone, a world where coalitions aren't automatic, a world where military action isn't about collective security anymore. It's about one man's political calendar. Carney isn't just protecting Canadian soldiers from a dubious war. He is protecting the principle that sovereign nations decide their own wars. He is drawing a line that says you can be our ally or you can be our commanding officer, but you cannot be both. Now, where do we go from here? This is the terrifying part, because usually in these crises, there is a back channel. Someone calls someone, a quiet deal is reached, a face-saving statement is issued, and the tanks stand down. But Trump doesn't do back channels when he's been publicly defied. And Carney can't reverse course after invoking international law on live television. We are looking at three scenarios. Scenario A, the stalemate. Trump blusters but delays the strike. Canada holds firm. The UN process grinds forward. Months pass. Tensions simmer but never boil over. Iran uses the time to negotiate from a position of strength. The war never happens, but the alliance never fully heals. This is messy but survivable. Scenario B, the unilateral strike. Trump goes in alone, no coalition, no UN mandate. Iran retaliates. Oil markets collapse. The Strait of Hormuz becomes a war zone. This is the nightmare scenario. This is geopolitical chaos on a scale we haven't seen since 2003. It would trigger a global recession almost overnight. It sounds extreme, but with this White House, you cannot rule out extreme. Scenario C, the realignment. Carney's stand becomes a turning point. Canada leads a new bloc of middle powers committed to multilateral security. They build parallel defense agreements. They create new diplomatic frameworks outside of U.S. dominance. This weakens America's global position permanently, but creates a more balanced world order. It means the era of American unilateral leadership is over for good. I think we are sitting in scenario A, sliding dangerously towards scenario B. This is the moment where statesmanship matters most. But Trump doesn't do statesmanship, and Carney has already planted his flag. We are in uncharted territory. The map you use to understand the world, the one where America leads and its allies follow without question, is on fire. Carney just proved that you can refuse a superpower if you have the law, the leverage, and the spine to do it. But refusal has consequences, and we are all about to feel them. The question isn't whether this gets worse. The question is who breaks first. Do you think Carney is protecting Canada's sovereignty and saving lives, or is he fracturing the Western alliance at the worst possible moment? I want to hear your take. Is this the end of the automatic alliance, or is it the wake-up call the world needed? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want to know what happens when the diplomatic cables start leaking tomorrow, and they will leak, make sure you're subscribed. You're going to want to see the next update. History is accelerating. Don't blink.